What's up, YouTube? This is Ben from grizzlybeargear.com. I am here to bring you another video all about archery. So in this video I do want to cover, as the title mentions, everything about arrow selection. And this is a tricky bit for new archers and for guys that have been in the game for a while. Selecting arrows can be a little bit daunting because there are so many options. Different arrow shafts for different applications, different fletching for different applications. But in this video we are going to keep it as short as possible, I promise. It's going to be a crash course on arrow selection, including the build materials that you'll see, arrow diameters, spine selection, arrow weight. We're going to talk about the components such as fletching, wraps, points, and other arrow components that come with your stock arrows that you'll be picking up. So without further ado, we will get rolling here. I think that I'm gonna do this the way I would if you were at the bow shop and I was trying to help you pick out some arrows. The first thing that I always talk to everybody about is the different build materials. So there are several materials out there. However, you will find that there's going to basically only be like one or two that you could use for your setup. These include, first, there is such a thing as fiberglass arrows, so those are limited to youth bows, and also you might see some fiberglass arrows show up for things like bow fishing and things like that. But in general, you're not going to be shooting a fiberglass arrow for your general bow hunting application or for target archery. So you can throw away fiberglass as a material for those two things. The old go-to was a wood arrow shaft. Now the one I'm holding is actually a carbon arrow with a wood grain wrap, so it just looks like a wooden arrow. However, it's not. And this is very common, and it's a good way to go for all those trad guys out there. Wood is it is a dated material. It is strictly for looks. There's nothing practical about it. It is not durable. It will warp and bend, and they break fairly easily. They also are very pricey, and they're not going to have the tolerances, straightness tolerances that you would look for in, say, a carbon or aluminum shaft. So that's build material one. It's been around for literally, thousands of years, certainly, is the wood arrow shaft. And then after that, we saw everybody transition to aluminum. Now this is a aluminum target arrow. So you can see this one's quite thick for cutting lines when you're shooting target. And you will see a lot of aluminum arrows on a target in a target situation. The aluminum arrows, the downfall of these guys is they will bend, and once this arrow is bent, it's pretty much done. Now you can get them straightened out. They're not going to ever be the same once they're bent. So that is the knock on these. However, they are able to make these actually to tighter tolerances than a carbon arrow in the same price range. So if you're looking for a very, very straight arrow, weight doesn't matter so much to you, this could be a good way to go, to look at some aluminum arrows. That being said, this is pretty much just a target thing, guys. A lot of guys, still come into the shop and want, they're Easton camo hunters for bow hunting. However, carbon's got them beaten every way. It just is what it is. They're more durable. Carbon is the king nowadays, as you will see. There's only a couple even options for an aluminum hunting arrow available anymore, because it's dated. So if you hate me saying that, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. Aluminum's taking a side seat to carbon everywhere pretty much, except for in the indoor target archery arena. Other than that, you're not going to see many aluminum arrows. They're not even really available anymore. So that's wood. And then, as I said, what has taken over is the carbon arrows. So I'm even giving you a visual representation of that by showing you a bunch of them. Because this is, that's what you're going to see in the store, a bunch of carbon arrows. Carbon arrows, the reason that carbon is king, okay? They're able to make this very, very straight to really good tolerances. You pretty much get exactly what you pay for as far as that goes. When a carbon arrow gets bent, when this arrow bends, it bends right back. This arrow will always be straight. If it's not straight and it stays bent, that means it is broken. So a carbon arrow is the most durable, hands down. So carbon arrows are the most durable. They're able to make them the really good tight straightness tolerances. Like this one here is a Carbon Express Blue RZ. This is basically a Maxima Red, but just the lightweight version. These are made to really, really tight tolerances. I believe, I'm trying to think, I think these are plus or minus 1/1000th of an inch, something like that. I mean, it's a really, really tight tolerance on these guys. I might be wrong. If I am, I'll try to, write a comment or something correcting that number, but it doesn't really matter. The point is, carbon arrows are the straightest, they're the most durable. They're either straight and ready to shoot, or they are broken and toast. So they'll never get bent like an aluminum arrow. Carbon's the king. What they have made, and I actually don't have one down here to show you, but I'll just tell you, I have them outside and it's too cold and it's raining, so I'm not going out to get them. But what they make now, and they have been making these for a few years, is an ACC arrow, which is a mixture of aluminum and carbon. So they make these in a couple ways. They either have a carbon tube with an aluminum sleeve around it, and that would be like your Easton Full Metal Jackets, one of those arrows. And then the other thing that they've been doing for a long time is like an ACC, which is where you have, on those arrows you will have a aluminum tube with carbon wrapped around the aluminum tube. So it looks like a carbon arrow, but inside there is a sleeve of aluminum. And what they're going for with those hybrid arrows is the best of both worlds. You get really, really good tight straightness tolerances. You also get some of that reboundability from the carbon arrow. You also will get one that bends like an aluminum arrow and stays bent, so that's the downside. I found them to be very, very durable. Also, generally they're quite, they're a little bit dense. They're somewhat heavy, which is, as you will find out later on in this video, or if you decide to read on the website, there's a totally comprehensive, it might be my best article on the website, where I laid out everything there is to know about arrows, more than I'm going to talk about here. This is more like a beginner guide, or just something to help you round out your knowledge. But I would check out that article if you want to know more about like ACC arrows and all the fine points. I have all the math calculations. I have links to calculators and things like that on that article, so you might want to check that out. But in this video I just wanted to cover those materials so you know what's out there, and basically the order of popularity that they go in, what most guys are using by far. So just to recap, those were fiberglass, wood, aluminum, and carbon. And pretty much all bow hunting at this point is using carbon or ACC arrows. There's a couple guys who just don't want to change. They're still shooting their aluminums for hunting, but that's it. In the target shooting world, you see a little bit of everything. The only exception to that is wood. The only time you're really going to see that is with a traditional setup where the guy's going all out, wood, leather, he's got feathers, a trad setup, as opposed to like an Olympic recurve setup. Again, then you're going to see like ACCs or carbon arrows, or sometimes an aluminum arrow for an indoor Olympic recurve setup. Okay, so those are our materials. Moving on, the thing that you must know, I guess, is what you're going to be using it for. So moving on, what we want to talk about is the diameter. So when you're picking an arrow, all the different shafts are going to be a different diameter. How fat is this arrow? So compare, like, this is a big, thick aluminum target arrow. Okay, you wouldn't use this for hunting. This is an Easton Axis. Now this is a narrow hunting arrow. What this I believe is a 244 thousandths diameter is an Axis, and so that's like a narrow hunting arrow. The standard is going to be like a 246 thousandths. Actually, I think this might be a 244, something like that. But anyway, like your gold tips, your Beeman, ICS hunters, things like that, those are all going to be 246 thousandths, which is the standard kind of hunting diameter size. As you get a wider arrow, the benefit of that for target is if you miss the bullseye by a little bit, and you were going to be out in the next ring, so you're going to lose some points. If you're shooting a fatter arrow like this guy, I mean, you can just see. Can you just see the? I mean, it's literally almost twice as fat, if not twice as fat. If you miss by a little bit, you might still catch the next ring with one of these fatter arrows and pick up some extra points. And I mean, so if I shot exactly as well as you do, and we shoot the same exact in every way, but you shot a slightly fatter arrow, on a target paper, you're likely to pick up a couple more points and beat me, even though we both shot just the same. So that's why you'll see target guys go into a fatter arrow. A thin arrow, one of these micro diameter arrows that they're making nowadays, the benefit of that is, first off, as you make this arrow fatter, it's also getting stiffer because you're changing, I mean, you know, again, in archery, physics happens. So physics happens, and as you make this diameter thicker, it's getting stiffer. It bends less, okay? If you make it more narrow, it's going to bend easier. All right, so how do they make up for that loss in stiffness? They make up for it by adding more material. So in general, a narrower arrow is going to actually weigh more than a thick arrow that are the same spine, the same length. The thin arrow weighs more because it takes more material to make the spine, as we will talk about later. It takes more material to get that spine up where this arrow is stiff enough for the same pound compound bow. Okay, so that's a big difference between the skinny arrows and the fat arrows. You're going to shoot a fat arrow for pretty much just like indoor target. If you're shooting outdoors, the downside of a fat arrow is it's going to get caught by the wind more. As that wind blows across this arrow, there's more surface area for it to catch and blow this arrow off target. On a narrow arrow, there's less surface area, so the wind's going to blow past it. This arrow's going to cut the wind a lot better. The wind ain't going to throw your shots off as much as it would if the arrow was thicker. So again, it depends what you're doing. These are, like, especially if you're shooting like 3D, that's a lot of personal preference comes in. You'll see some guys shooting a micro diameter shaft. You see some guys shooting something like a 22, like a big, somewhat big middle of the road thickness arrow to try to cut some lines. I would say it depends a lot on, like, when you get there, how windy is it raining, things like that, to make that decision for you. So that's your diameter. Some are thicker, some are thinner. Generally for hunting, you're talking like a 246. Okay. As you make the arrow more narrow, again for hunting, another nice benefit is you are focusing that energy into a smaller area. So in theory, you're going to get more penetration. There's a lot that goes into that. I've heard arguments saying, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because you still have to push the same point through. This is my point, is that if you're making it narrower, you're still focusing that energy into a smaller point, like a hypodermic needle, you know. You're putting in a very small point, so that's going to get more penetration. Also, in general, this arrow is going to weigh more than the same spined arrow will if it was a little thicker. So, for hunting, a thin arrow is really, really a good thing. Good penetration, wind doesn't affect it, and it does generally, it's going to weigh a little bit more. Okay? So that's the diameters. What I talked about there a lot was the spine. This is something many archers do not understand at all. Okay, so spine. A spine is the measurement of the arrow's flexibility. Okay? It's literally the number that the spine is a measurement of how much this arrow bends. It measures the displacement when they test it. I was able to visit the Easton factory out in Salt Lake City, and you know, they kind of filled me in on this. What they will literally do is they will support an arrow shaft on both ends, and then they hang a 2-pound weight right in the middle, and that pulls down and bends the arrow, and they measure the deflection, how much that arrow just moved from the 2-pound weight. And that that measurement in thousandths of an inch is the spine. So if you have a 350 spine, that means when they hung it up and they held that 2-pound weight in the middle and it bent, it went 350 thousandths of an inch. That was the measurement of the deflection. And that's all that spine is. It is measuring how much the arrow bends. This is critical for archery because the arrow, as we all know, doesn't fly nice and straight. It's flying like this. It's wobbling, it's porpoising, and fishtailing as it goes downrange out of our bow. Okay, if you don't believe me, watch a high-speed video of an arrow. Especially if you're shooting like a long bow and the true archer's paradox is affecting, or whatever, it's playing into your shot. The spine is really critical. Okay, you need the arrow to bend to correct itself because it's not flying straight. It wants to wobble. If it bends, it's going to correct itself faster. Okay, if it bends too much, that's going to have the same problem. It's going to, well, it's a different problem, but it's still going to make you shoot poorly. The other thing is that if your spine is too weak, what will happen is you'll draw, you'll let one rip, and it'll just explode. And I've seen guys get shards of arrow driven, I mean, right into the wrist, poking out the other side. Really nasty stuff. It is probably the biggest safety concern is that you are selecting an arrow that is appropriate for your bow. If you go with one that's too stiff, too heavy, it's not going to hurt you, it's not going to damage your bow, it just won't shoot good because it's not going to flex and correct itself. It's just going to wobble its way down range, and that's when you're going to see an arrow fly literally like this, something like this, and it's going to go sideways. Spine is very important. How do you know what spine you need? All you need to know is how long your arrow is, and you need to know what your draw weight is. And then what you can do is you go into the manufacturer's catalog and you find their chart and you look down the row that is your arrow length and you look over the row of your draw weight and you match those up and it'll give you what spine you need. This is a really good spot to start. What I've found is with a compound bow, it doesn't hurt to err one side too stiff. So if this chart says you need a 350, you could, with a compound bow, use say a 300 or a 250, which is a stiffer and then a more stiffer arrow shaft. So that's an option. The reason is that modern compound bows are cranking out so much energy. If it's a little bit stiff, it's going to be okay. It's still going to shoot well. The other thing is a lot of guys run heavy point weight, which is going to have the effect of breaking the arrow because there's more force acting on the front of the arrow when released. So you got the string pushing back here, okay? String's pushing back here. Heavy point weight up front is pushing back, okay? You got to think about this. And that breaks the arrow. So having more point weight breaks down your spine. So that is another consideration when you're looking at the chart. That is something that will ask you is how heavy of a point are you planning to use? You can't just think about your point. You also got to consider the weight of your insert. Are you going to shoot the standard aluminum insert that comes with your arrows? Or are you going to add, say, a 50 or 75 grain brass insert? Because that's also point weight, and that also will break down your spine. Okay, so with a compound bow, it doesn't hurt to err one spine chart stiffer than what it recommends. Okay, with a traditional setup, and you're shooting your wood arrows or what have you, hopefully you pick a carbon arrow. I mean, I really believe that something like this is a really good way to go because you still look like you're shooting a trad arrow, but you have all the benefits of a carbon arrow and it's going to be cheaper. Anyhow, with a traditional setup, I'm not going to recommend wide out that you guys go buy a spine that's too weak for your bow. Okay, there's a reason that the spine chart's there, that the company comes up with what it does, is because it protects them. That way they are not liable if you hurt yourself shooting an arrow that is too weak. That being said, with a traditional setup, you're shooting 160, 170 feet per second compared to the compound shooting 330, 320, 330 feet per second. It's going way slower. There's way less energy in that traditional setup. When you look at the spine chart, now these are two different charts. The compound chart will be totally different from your recurve and longbow chart. So they do already consider this, but I take it a step further. what I have found after tuning thousands of recurve bows and long bows is it doesn't hurt to just go ahead and get your arrows for your trad setup one spine chart weaker than what it recommends. Okay, get an arrow that's slightly more flexible than what the chart recommends. Again, the reason that they recommend that one is for liability reasons. They don't want you to get one that's too weak and then hurt yourself. Okay, but it's a guarantee that what the chart says is going to be too weak or too stiff for your trad setup. I mean, guaranteed. When you go bear shaft tuning, French tuning, what have you, you're going to find out real quick that those arrows are too dang stiff, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you can get 250 grains up front before that's going to start breaking down. I mean, you're going to be shooting really, really slow. So that's my opinion. I say with a compound bow, you can, if you so choose, you can get an arrow that is one spine too stiff. With a traditional bow, you can get an arrow that is one spine on the weak side. And usually, I don't want to recommend this because I don't want any of you guys to go get hurt. So be careful when you do this. Usually, it's really 2, sometimes 3 spine ratings weaker than what the chart suggested for like a long bow or recurve. 2 or 3. A really good one to look at from experience. Look at the Easton Youth spine charts. Use those for your recurve and your longbow. All right. I've just found that those are usually pretty good. Those are usually pretty good. The best thing you can do, especially you trad guys, is actually go to the shop and have the guys set up some shafts for you to bear shaft tune your bow before you go buying a whole dozen or 2 dozen arrows. Okay, find the right spine first. Make the sacrifice, you know, spend 20 bucks to try a couple and try a couple out. Buy cheap arrows. Like a great option is like, I got some. All right, so what we got here is like a series of arrows that Gold Tip makes. You know, so you got one down here. This one is actually a little bit cheaper than this one, but they're the same exact shaft. The difference is in the straightness tolerances. That's why one costs less. But this would still work. The cheap one would work for the sake of finding out what spine works for you. Just use some cheap arrows that are available in different spines and try them out. And then even if you move to a different manufacturer or whatever, it's going to be really, really close. But it would be sweet if you could do something like these, like what Gold Tip does, and you could get like a Hunter and a Hunter Pro or a Hunter XT and try those ones out, because that way you could, for the sake of finding out what spine you need, you can get some cheap ones, and you know, it doesn't hurt so bad when you buy the wrong ones. And then later on you could upgrade to like a Hunter XT or a Hunter Pro for a little bit more money and have a better built arrow. So that's a really good option for you guys. Alright, that's arrow spine. It's a measure of the flexibility. You need to know your length and your draw weight. As an asterisk, you need to know your point weight, but then you're just going to look in the manufacturer's chart and track it down. It'll tell you what spine you need. Okay, everybody except for Carbon Express rates their spine the same way, where the lower the number, the stiffer the arrow. The higher the number, the weaker the arrow. So if you see on your arrows and it says 340, alright, let's see here. Alright, see how there's a number there? A lot of guys think that's how much this arrow weighs. It's not. It's a measure of the spine, okay? It's how much the arrow bends. Carbon Express does it backwards. So a 250 is actually weaker than a 350. It's more flexible than the 350. So they're the oddballs. They go backwards. I don't know why. I love their arrows, but I don't know why they do that. It's not a big deal. You just got to remember Carbon Express is the weirdo. Everybody else, the lower the number, the stiffer the arrow. The higher the number, the weaker the arrow. Okay? That's the lowdown on spines. Okay, so we've talked about diameter and spine. The other big topic is arrow weight. Okay, this is where opinion starts to set in for the first time. Now, diameter, there's opinions about that, but it's nothing like the debate that is ongoing about arrow weight. Okay, so there are obviously lightweight arrows and there are heavier arrows. A lot of things affect the weight, including design. I mean, you know, companies make arrows intentionally heavy or intentionally light for different applications. That being said, okay, you can't really, There's a lot of opinions, but you're not wrong. So if you want a light arrow that shoots fast, you're not wrong. If you want a heavy arrow that's quiet and has a lot of momentum, a lot of kinetic energy, you're not wrong. Okay, guys, there's basically just two teams, and you're gonna have to pick one and try it out. I've tried full metal jackets. I've tried like these. This is what I'm shooting now. Those blue RZs that I mentioned. These are a lightweight arrow, so I'm shooting those for hunting. You're not wrong one way or another. Just try different things out. It's supposed to be fun. Basically, I'll give you the pros of shooting heavy and light arrows. If you're shooting a heavier arrow, benefit is going to be, again, you're going to have more momentum, you're going to have more kinetic energy. A nice benefit of a heavier arrow is that your bow will literally be quieter. Adding arrow weight is one of the best ways to make a bow quieter, by far. By far, it works like magic. You add 50, you add 100 grains to that arrow, it is very obvious that your bow is shooting quieter. Another advantage, because it has momentum, more momentum, the heavier arrow actually doesn't lose its velocity as fast. So at 100 yards, you're going to be shooting almost as fast as it was out of the bow, or at least proportionally. It's going to keep that speed a lot better than a lighter arrow will, because the lighter arrow has less momentum, so it's losing its velocity as it goes downrange faster than the heavier arrow will. So that's physics happens a lot in archery. That's pretty complicated stuff. Again, I would recommend that you just read the article that I wrote. I go into it in more depth. I kind of explain things. I even use some math, which is scary stuff. But that's on the website. If you go to grizzlybeargear.com, you click on articles, archery. There's I mean, truly just a great, everything you would want to know about buying arrows, especially if you're just starting out. It will, I wish that was there when I started, because I read tons of books and stuff to get all that. I mean, it's been, dang, I mean, it's been 15 years of shooting bow to get to this point where I was able to write that. That was 15 years of knowledge in that article, so I would check that out. If you're shooting a lightweight arrow, why would you want to do that as opposed to, because I just named all those great things about a heavy arrow. So a lightweight arrow is going to shoot faster. When they do, like when you are shopping for a bow and it says, oh, this bow shoots 360 feet per second. Well, that's the IBO speed. So when they're shooting that, they're using an arrow that weighs like practically nothing. It's 350 grains totally set up. So that's like nothing. That's a paperweight. Or not even. It is paperweight. So when the arrow's lighter, you're really going to get great velocity, especially like right out of the bow. This velocity, what this does for you is it makes you shoot a very, very flat trajectory. So what this means is my 20-yard pin with a fast arrow, a light arrow, might still be on at 25, 30 yards. I might be able to use my 30-yard pin out to 36 yards and down to 20 yards because my arrow's just shooting so nice and flat. If you're shooting a heavy arrow, there's going to be more of a lob to it. So you're gonna have larger pin gaps. If you're shooting a single pin sight, it's going to be more important that you're dialed exactly where you need to go. Because the arrow is faster, you might have less string jump where the game ducks your arrow or lunges forward right when you shoot because they hear the twang of the bow and they make a flinch before the arrow gets there. That's called string jump. With a lighter arrow, because the arrow's getting there faster, there might be less time for that animal to jump the string. The flip side of that is if you're shooting a heavier arrow, your bow is going to be a little bit quieter, so that might have the same effect where you help eliminate some of the string jump by shooting a heavier arrow too. So that's a moot point. That's a toss-up. They both get a piece of that, I would say. You know, generally for what you see a lot of is lightweight arrows on something like a 3D course, because you do get the flatter trajectory. Okay, so if I misjudge the range on a 3D target and I shoot and say I thought it was 4 yards closer than it was, well, if I'm shooting a lighter arrow, I'm going to miss by less than if I was shooting a heavier arrow. I'm going to miss by more because I misjudged the range and my arrow's shooting very lobby. So wherever my point of aim was, it's going to be more significantly off than it would be if I was shooting a lighter arrow. For hunting, a heavier arrow has more momentum more kinetic energy, it's going to punch through the animal and get more penetration. Okay, you're going to drive broadheads through things a lot better than you would with a lightweight arrow. So for hunting, that's where the heavy arrows are very, very popular. Also for like indoor archery, indoor target, a heavy arrow might be nice because it actually is moving slower. You know, this could help you potentially to be a little bit more consistent. Whatever side you're on as far as arrow weight goes, you're not wrong. Okay, I can't tell you how many arguments there have been on Facebook and whatnot about arrow weight. It's just, guys, I mean, with my lightweight Maxima Blue RZs, I shoot a deer and I shot and it went right through my buck, and it stuck into a tree root and buried the whole broadhead into the tree root. So I got to pass through it 25 yards straight through the deer into a tree root. I mean, it would have shot through 2 deer and probably killed a third one behind that. Okay, with a lightweight arrow. All right. So I mean, like, are you hunting like a Cape buffalo that you need that 650 grain arrow? No, you're probably hunting white-tailed deer like I am, or that size game. If you want to shoot a heavy arrow, I mean, I used to shoot those too. I got pass-throughs with those too. I mean, pick a side. It doesn't. You're not right or wrong. My suggestion is that you try both and just, I mean, suit your fancy. It doesn't matter. Arrows are a really great place where we get to be creative. Okay, so try different things out. Now, so those are most of the physical attributes of an arrow shaft. So that's the big thing. You're choosing the shaft. You know, when you're buying arrows at the store, don't go, oh, that one has cool, that's got 2 pink and 1 white, and it's got a nice white wrap, I want those. Don't do that. Buy the arrow based on the shaft. Alright? Real quick, before I talk about components, I want to talk about this real quick. I kind of touched on it. Why are some shafts just so much more expensive than others? I mean, you're talking like an X10 shaft will be $40 an arrow, and then you got something like a gold tip punter is going to cost you $675 an arrow. Why is this arrow so much more expensive when maybe they're the same spine, they're the same diameter, they're the same weight? Why is this one so much more expensive? The answer to this question is the manufacturing tolerances. So how straight is this arrow compared to another arrow? Also, if I measured this inch of shaft compared to this inch of shaft, would they weigh exactly the same? And what are those tolerances? What is the plus or minus? How off is an arrow? The tolerances. That's what you pay for when you buy an arrow. Okay? There are a couple that have like technology packed into them. Like, I'm sure you've seen the ads for like a Maxima Red, right? Where this is the red zone that flexes to help you stabilize your broadheads faster. Some arrows have different technology, you know, where they taper down narrower in the front, they're a little thicker in the back. More weight up front, less weight up back to increase the front of center, also known as FOC. That's a big topic I'm not really going to get into on this video. Again, I went into it in grave detail inside of my article, but for this video I'm trying to keep it short. We're not going to talk about FOC so much. The important thing to know about FOC is just you need more weight up front on your arrow than you need in the back. Okay? Think about throwing like one of those Nerf footballs back in the day. You need the weight up front. That's what's going to ultimately steer the arrow down range and keep it on track. There's a lot to be said about FOC, but most standard hunting setups where you've got your arrow with a 100 grain point on top is going to be fine for your normal bow hunting. Okay, don't fret too much about FOC, but it is important. But that's why arrows cost different, is the tolerances that they're made to. Okay, you get what you pay for. Does it matter so much to the average guy if his arrow is plus or minus 0.06 of an inch straight or plus or minus 1/1000 of an inch straight? So if it is less straight versus more straight, 1/1000, less straight, 0.06. Simple answer is no. It doesn't matter so much if the arrow is straighter than the other arrow. The person it matters to is like that average shooter who is shooting, and I mean, this guy's wicked. He's going to notice that the cheap arrows will group like this, say, and then the same exact arrow that's made better will group like this. He'll be able to punch these nice tight groups with those arrows. It literally will shrink your group instantly to shoot a better quality arrow. Okay, because it is straighter, it's more precise. So it is worth investing in a high quality arrow that's very straight. Yeah, it is. If what you're doing is bow hunting 30 yards or less and you only get out to shoot once a week, I don't know. I don't know if you're going to notice a huge difference, to be real honest with you. You might as well just get the cheap ones. Okay? The people that it matters to are the guys that are shooting nice groups. They will literally see their group shrink as they upgrade their arrow. Alright? That's the scoop on tolerances, that's the scoop on price. If everything about two arrows is the same, but one costs more and one costs less, look at the tolerances that they're made to. That's probably it. And then make your own decision. Myself, I'm not an excellent shot, okay? I'm not going to sit here in front of you and say, oh, I'm an awesome shot. I like shooting. I'd say I probably run 100 arrows through my bow every week, which is pretty good. So if I go out, I'll shoot 20 or 30 arrows 3 or 4 times a week, something like that. And I'm decent, okay? When I shoot at a 3D shoot, I finish right with the best guys, but I don't beat the best guy. So that's where I'm at. Nobody's paying me to shoot their bow because I'm so good at it, or paying me to use their arrows because I'm so good at it. That's not how it works. Luckily, I know how to do things with the bow, so that's how I make my way. Not so much with my skill with one. But if you are serious about it, I mean, at the end of the day, you will lose 2 guys that are comparable in skill level. The guy shooting a better quality arrow will beat the guy with the cheaper arrow, all else being equal. It is what it is. Alright, and then another thing to think about with the tolerances is once you're bow hunting, think about stacked tolerances. So if you buy a cheap, like bad made broadhead, and you put it into an insert on that cheap insert and that cheap arrow shaft with a cheap knock in the back, where you're stacked a bunch of cheap tolerances and now you're about ready to go try to take something's life. I don't recommend it, okay? Pick something decent, pick another thing decent, so that way you don't start stacking tolerances and ending up with a big problem. If you do get cheap arrow shafts, make sure everything else is good. Spin test them, make sure that they spin right, make sure that they tune well. Try them, you know, a lot before you go out hunting with them. Alright? So that's why one arrow will cost way more than another. And that pretty much wraps up everything, I think, that I wanted to talk about when it comes to arrow shaft selection. The last thing that we need to talk about, though, is the components. And these are almost like something I could talk about in different videos, each one. But we'll brush over them. So with the components, your stock arrow is going to come as a shaft. Generally, a stock arrow is going to come with some sort of vanes on there already. All right. So fletching is a big topic. You know, there's all different ways you could fletch your arrow up. I got a couple here at least. Let's see here. What do we got? All right. So we got some feathers, right? Like a 4-inch feather. We got a blazer vane, and a vane compared to a feather is literally a feather, and a vane is plastic. That's what's meant by a vane. They're both types of fletching. One is a vane, one is a feather. This is again a plastic vane. It's just a different profile here and a different length than the blazer vane is for different application. This is really like a hunting vane, or a target vane rather. And we got some more feathers here. Okay, so feathers. If you choose feathers, the reason that you're really going to need them is if you're shooting traditional and you're shooting right off the shelf. Then you need feathers, because if you shoot a vane, it's just going to kick off your shelf and go flying all squirrely. Alright, so you need feathers if you're shooting off the shelf. You need them. There's no option to shoot vanes. You will never shoot well. Okay? That's who needs feathers. If you want to shoot feathers out of a compound bow, there's nothing wrong with that. There isn't. It will work quite well. I've even done it just because I like the way that they look. Okay? This is somewhere where we can be creative, guys. Customize your arrows. Feathers are louder, so if I shoot a feather arrow and somebody's standing halfway down range and they hear it go by, it's going to be way louder. Again, if you're hunting game, that's something else that could cause them to jump the string, because the feather is down range. It makes quite a sound. A vane is practically silent compared to a feather. Okay. Another thing about feathers is they do create more drag, so that's going to slow the arrow down a little bit and stabilize it faster. When you talk about drag, that's what you're doing. You're slowing the arrow down and stabilizing it faster. Okay, more versus less drag. There's different times you want both. If you're shooting indoor archery, you know, that's what I got these guys set up for, is for shooting indoor. Now this is a big full bore. This is like a 27. This is just like my other Eastons here, the aluminum guy that I showed you earlier. Okay, these are for shooting indoor, and I've got the big long feathers, and I've got them on a helical twist. So let's see if there's a good way to show that to you. See how that arrow is on there? Helical. Okay, that's to make it spin and create drag as fast as it can, because you're only shooting 20 yards indoor. This arrow has to straighten itself out and be flying like a tack, like a dart, as quick as possible. So I put those feathers on there, slow it down, help it stabilize quicker. Okay, so those are feathers. Again, for vanes, what's meant by a vane is this is a fletching made of basically plastic. Okay, vanes have taken over when it comes to compound bows. You even see them on really low profile vanes on Olympic recurve setups, where you're shooting an arrow rest, like a little plunger with a rest. This isn't something that you're talking about when you're shooting off the shelf, but if you're shooting a plunger with a rest on an Olympic setup, people shoot very, very small plastic vanes. Okay, but for hunting, nowadays you see 9 out of 10 hunters shooting a blazer vane. Okay, these are 2 inches long and they have a very high profile. So this is actually taller off of the arrow shaft than, say, a 4-inch, one of the old school plastic vanes that used to look like a feather. This is actually taller than that. Okay, and this helps a lot for steering broadheads, especially like those fixed blade broadheads that a lot of guys like to shoot. So blazer vanes have taken over. They're lightweight, they're high profile, so they do a great job stabilizing and steering broadheads. They're also quite durable. Okay, so that's your blazer vanes. These guys have taken over. There's nothing wrong with shooting a longer one, but they're slower. They're not high profile, so they're not going to steer broadhead as well. When blazer vanes showed up, they took over and pretty much have stayed there. So I'm saying the brand name blazer vane. There are other companies who make the same thing. Okay, I mean, AAE makes some. I think they're called Max Hunters. All of the arrow manufacturers basically make their own vanes. Like in gold tip, they're called Raptor vanes. If you get like a Q2, that would be a similar vane as a blazer vane. There's a bunch of blazer vanes, but basically in the industry, they're all called blazer vanes because it's a short vane with a high profile for basically for hunting. When you are setting up your arrows, and you're fletching them, you do have different offsets that you can use. So like I showed you with that arrow, how helical it is. You can see how twisted it is, like a boat propeller. So it's twisted around there like a boat propeller, right? You could put them on straight or offset. So on a straight vane, you'll see that those ones are just perfectly straight on there. The other thing you can do is turn them just a little bit, and that's what's going to be called a right or a left offset. Okay, so you can put these on straight, but turn a little bit to help it spin faster. The helical is going to get that thing spinning the fastest, but it's also going to sacrifice the most speed. This will sacrifice very little speed. It won't make it spin as fast as a helical. That spin for target archery, like I said, in indoor is very, very big. For hunting, it's going to help a lot to get your broadheads to stabilize. Broadhead tuning is a big deal. Something like the way that you offset your vanes will help. Okay, so that's an option. I use this fletching jig. Maybe I'll make a video of me using it sometime soon. Drop a comment if you would like to see that. If nobody wants to see it, I'll probably put it off for a while, but I do fletch my own arrows. It's I wouldn't say cost effective so much. It's about the same cost as having somebody else do it at the end of the day. But it's enjoyable for me, first off. The other thing is that I like doing custom stuff. I like being able to experiment at home with new setups on my arrows. So that's why I choose to fletch my own arrows. Another component, so let's just run down what's going to come on your arrow. So you obviously, most stock arrows come with vanes. You can just buy shafts. That's what I do because I fletch my own. They're also going to come with a knock. Okay, sometimes a knock bushing of sorts. Not all nocks are technically created equal. There are different, you know, some are made better than others. They're made to tighter tolerances. Does it matter? Yes. This is kind of this is a nitty-gritty topic, is different nocks, but there is a bunch of ways you can go. Most of you are just going to take whatever one comes with the arrow. It's going to do a fine job for 99% of you. Again, if you want to know more, say specifically what you would like to know, and I'll definitely get back to you. I might even make another video about it. Okay. The other thing that stock arrows come with is some sort of an insert. Okay. So the insert gets glued inside of the shaft, or sometimes outside of it. There's all different. But anyway, an insert, so that way you can take your point and thread that baby in there, whatever it is, and that's that. If you buy target arrows, a lot of target arrows, you got to buy each component separate first off, so don't let those prices start to add up quick. Okay, let me tell you, people, lots of angry customers when they see the final bill. But you got to buy all the components. Something like this indoor arrow, a lot of guys aren't going to get an insert. They're going to take a target point and glue that right in. Remember earlier I talked about stacking tolerances? Well, every time there's a minute flaw in an insert, in the point, in the shaft, you are adding those things up, stacked tolerances. For target shooting, you can eliminate some of those stacking of tolerances by just getting a point that glues right into the arrow shaft, and there you go, ready to rock. Not so practical for hunting, because we're taking our field points out and putting in broadheads and back and forth with a judo point and a stud. So there's all those different things that you can do. That's why we like a threaded insert. It makes it really easy for us. But for target archers, a lot of times the glue-in point is going to be the way to go. Okay. What about anything else for arrow components? I mean, obviously the point, I kind of just talked about that. Most points are just going to be a screw-in point. Okay. You're going to get to pick the point weight. Okay. That's where your tuning comes in. That's where front of center comes in to know what point weight to use. The standard is 100 grains. There's nothing wrong with that. What you need to understand is, first off, you can always increase or decrease by changing the point to a different point weight. You can also change the weight by changing what insert you use. So like on a stock arrow, you're just going to have that aluminum insert. Can you see it? Maybe a little bit in there. So you got that aluminum insert. What you can do is you can upgrade that insert, or maybe not upgrade, but buy new aftermarket inserts that are made of brass that are quite heavy. So you could throw whatever you want. I mean, a 25 grain insert, a 50, 100, 150 grain insert into your arrow and add a ton of point weight, add a lot of front of center to the arrow. This is something that works really, really well when you're having broadhead problems. I'll get into this in like a tuning video or something, but so you're aware, there are different inserts, okay? You're not necessarily locked into whatever insert you've got. It would also be something affecting price, like what inserts are available for this arrow might affect the price of the arrow as you're buying it. Alright, so that's the point weight. Just remember too that as you upgrade that point weight, like I talked about earlier, you are adding the amount of force exerted on the arrow at the front when you release. So you are breaking your spine down. You are making the same arrow that, say this was a 300 spine arrow, it's still a 300 spine arrow, but if you go from 100 grains up front to 250 grains up front, you've essentially made this like, I mean, a way weaker arrow. You've made this like a 450 or something. I mean, you've moved this at least one full spine chart if you add 100 grains of point weight. So if you're going to do that, you need to think about this before you buy your arrow shafts. Alright, I know I'm going to run 250 grains up front. I'm going to put a 100 grain brass insert in. I'm going to screw in a 25 grain weight into the back of that insert, and then I'm going to throw on a 125 grain point. If you know you're going to do this, you need to buy an arrow that is much stiffer than the one that chart recommends. Okay, just to make sure that you guys are aware of that. You can't just add point weight, because you are making that arrow weaker and weaker and weaker. You could end up hurting yourself and be one of the guys with a bunch of carbon in their armor. Okay, not a fun time. Alright, we already talked about why arrows are straighter than others, but while we're talking about components, remember that the components, how well they're made, factors into that price. So a cheap arrow, there's a good chance you're getting really cheap components that are not made well. As when you buy a good arrow, it's almost a guarantee that that factory has taken the time to make a very high quality nock, a high quality nock bushing. You're going to get good inserts, all that stuff. It's going to be a well-made arrow. Okay. And that's just going to about cover it. I think I've covered everything I wanted to. That being, we talked about diameter, we talked about spine, arrow weight, we talked about the different straightness and weight tolerances, and then finally we talked about the components such as fletching, wraps, nocks, inserts, and points. Okay, I talked about briefly nock bushings, talked about briefly aftermarket inserts, briefly adding point weight via screw-in weight to the back of the insert. These are all other things. If you need to know more about, feel free to reach out to me. Just write a comment below the video. I answer those very quickly, usually within a day or so. That's about it, guys. I have covered everything I wanted to. Whether you are a seasoned archer or if you're a novice looking to get into bow hunting or target archery, I hope that you found this video informative and helpful. I stress all this because it's so true. I mean, for every buying decision, you know, when you're buying product A versus product B, you have to make a decision. There's usually not a right or a wrong answer. Everything in archery comes with a trade-off. So with arrows, you're going to make a trade. You're going to usually have to trade some speed for some momentum. You're going to have to trade. I mean, you're going to have to trade whatever. There's always a trade-off. Okay, you're going to have to buy, you know, a slightly more expensive arrow to get the tolerances that you want. Everything comes with a trade. Whatever you pick, there's, whatever benefit that you get from picking that, you're also probably losing an advantage that you would have had if you went the other way. That is what it is. There's believers on every team. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. A lot of the stuff is opinion based. Some guys have experience that backs up their opinion, but I've heard experience that backs up another opinion. Okay. At the end of the day, if you go with something ethical, it's probably not going to be the reason that you don't get a deer. That's going to boil down to you making a good shot and being accurate and having practiced. Okay, it's not going to come down to whether or not you ran that brass insert or the aluminum insert. Okay, I mean, if you make a good shot, it just doesn't really matter. You can stick them with 35 pounds and just I mean, the Indians did it with wooden bows. Okay, guys, and wooden arrows with rocks. So. Basically, your experiences as you experiment with things are going to end up putting you on a team, whether it's the speed team or the heavy arrow team, the blazer vanes versus the feathers, whatever it is. So that's how that's going to go. Please understand that, you know, you're not right, somebody else isn't right. You know, that just is the way it is. All right, everything comes with a trade-off in the sport of archery. Especially, I mean, at least when it comes to picking equipment, that's just the way it is. But again, I don't want you to hesitate if you have any questions, and please just let me know if I can help you out. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please do me a favor, please, and give me a thumbs up. It's right, I think, down there. You can give this video a thumbs up. It's sort of just like giving me a quick round of applause. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to check out this video. Please feel free to go over to my website. It is grizzlybeargear.com, and there is that comprehensive arrow selection article. Finally, please, this is what I really need from you in order to be able to keep making these videos, is I need you guys to subscribe. So if you can click the subscription box, what you get out of that is you will be informed next time I release a video. So that's what you will get. You won't miss any of my new videos that I'm coming out with at least once a week. Usually, I mean, sometimes I go in bouts where I'm putting them out every day. But you know, there's going to be new content rolling out all the time. Again, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you clicking and watching this. If you go to the website and you do end up purchasing something, just know that 10% of all the profits are going to conservation. We just bought 250 trees that we went out and planted, so that's a start. We did that over Easter weekend, and that's thanks to the proceeds of the website. Actually, that wasn't 10%. That was actually me. I just took all of the website money and I went and bought a bunch of oak trees. So we got some nice white oaks out there now here in PA, gonna grow up. So please, again, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment or write me a message of sorts, so that way I can come up with a video that you need to know about. Let me know what you want to see and I will make it. I will get back to you guys. I will answer your questions. I promise. Alright? Thank you so much. Have a great day. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. And on the website and leaving me subscriptions. So thanks guys. Good luck to you, whether you're hunting foam or paper, or if you're hunting a deer or a bear. I wish you success, and I would like to help you guys out. So thanks from me and everybody else here at Grizzly Bear Gear. Have a great day.